Hey, everybody, welcome again to Each on the News. We've got Jeff Collins, CEO of WanAware, and we'll talk a bit about what's happening out there in the channel and find out what this thing about visibility as a service is all about, and dig into how, he's helping MSPs guide towards that great journey. Jeffrey, welcome, man. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Julian.
Good stuff. All right, let's just jump into this. For those who don't know WanAware, give us the basics.
Yeah, sure. So WanAware's an actionable observability company. What we do is we look at cybersecurity, performance, and availability of customer workloads, really regardless of where they are. They could be in the cloud, they could be on premise, they could be IoT, OT, doesn't really matter. The big differentiation that we do that's kind of different than everybody else within the space is we understand the contextual awareness of a customer's connected assets, so all those components that we would be monitoring. And so it helps us really understand and minimize false positives because we understand the dependencies and interdependencies of a workload. It's really what, if you think about what a NOC might do inside of an organization, we're performing a lot of those functions for that customer through our system. So it's really kind of understanding those relationships, understanding the blast radius, the core incident source, and remediating those and providing a path for a customer to remediate those as well.
So, Jeff, we're in this world now, right, of AI everything. And although we're probably tired of hearing the word AI now, but hey, it is what it is. And the reality is that there's a lot of moving parts to these companies and their tech stack, right? People are questioning a lot of things like, do I really need all this tech, right? Is this tech delivering what I really needed to deliver? What is the real outcomes here, right? And do I even know what I got? Like, do I have way too much? Right. So let's talk just from that standpoint alone, right? That identifying, putting some visibility in what you've got under your hood. How is that impacting how customers, how MSPs move forward in this game today?
Yeah, I think, over time, that's always continued to be a huge issue. MSPs always wrestle with understanding what customers have, understanding the scope of what customers have, understand how they use those individual resources or those assets. That's always been, certainly hard historically. In this era of I would say it's probably, grown substantially. I wouldn't even say probably, it definitely has grown
It is.
substantially. You think about assets, not only are assets servers and infrastructure and workloads and services and everything else we've historically dealt with, but now we have this whole era of AI infrastructure. And then we also have this ability where AI can uncover a lot of things that none of us knew about. Whether that uncovering is done from a malicious perspective, which we certainly all see across the board, we have capabilities of leveraging AI, really even outside of Mythos. You could go out and run Claude's just standard Opus today and perform the same thing. You could run Gemini, you could run OpenAI, you could do any of those. And so all those pieces really contribute to this huge gap in terms of knowledge. And really, the key for the whole channel itself, whether you're an MSP, whether you're an advisor, really wherever you are within the channel space, the key is understanding what your customers have holistically, being able to leverage that, and then being able to add in your value added services on top of that so that you can stay ahead of this. And those threats aren't only security threats. We so often focus on AI as a security threat or even external security threats, but we always have to continue to remain diligent on operational threats as well. We have outages, we have possibility of externally sourced outages. We have internally sourced where, our environments are just getting more and more complex. And how do we understand that? How do we provide that visibility and how do we provide that intelligence around it?
Yeah, I mean, you even got the insider threats are, is moving on. Then you've got all the agents. That's going to
Yep.
add another layer of threats. Let's just double click in the Mythos for a second there. So I mean, they're discovering apparently, right, stuff that humans and all the pen testing and all the stuff that's been done in the past missed, right? So this discoverability is kind of getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the code, right? What's your thoughts on this?
Really, my thoughts, and I would expand my thoughts past Mythos because, the reality is Mythos just made it simpler. The
Mm,
reality is you can do effectively the same thing that Mythos is doing with any AI tool of the month that you choose. Whether you stay on the Claude path and you leverage Opus, or you go into the OpenAI realm, or Google, or whichever path you want to go. The reality is that this construct behind the ability to understand and the ability to infer of AI is extremely concerning, and it should be extremely concerning for all of us. You can simply add in a few prompts and you can uncover a huge amount of detail into a customer's environment. You can quickly understand risks, you can understand vulnerabilities, you can understand public access, you can understand how to compromise that access. You can then understand, based upon what that individual access has given you, what else can be compromised. And again, these are all compromises both from an operational and a cybersecurity perspective. That's highly concerning, and all of us need to really think about this in the realm of, everything that we've done before, we have to continually do better. And the reality is with this, customers out there, you think about enterprises, you think about the mid-market, you even move into SMB, everybody is highly concerned about this at this point in time. They're concerned about, what do I do to, solve this? And if we all think about this, really the first place they're going to go by and large is they're going to go to their channel partners. They're going to go to their MSPs, their advisory firms, entities like that, because the reality is organizations still have the same problem that they've had for 20 years, 30 years now. They don't have the staff that have the capability. They can't hire them. They can't find them. They can't train them. They can't develop them. I mean, it's the same story that's always happened. And so they need organizations that are purpose built to solve this. Now, as they uncover these organizations, those organizations have to be able to expedite and to be able to interact and solve these problems expeditiously. If visibility out there is still archaic and relational, which is how most visibility has historically been, I define this IP that I'm looking at. I define this machine that I'm looking at. Well, in today's ecosystem, we're dealing with more and more ephemeral assets. We're dealing with more and more infrastructure that constantly changes. I mean, just look at IoT and OT in organizations. How do you operate at scale? And really, the key for the channel is to build an environment that is able to support that can auto discover, that can auto understand, that can incorporate directly into customer CI/CD. So as customers deploy, the MSP is right in line with them. They're moving at the customer speed. And I
mm.
think that's really the key when we think about visibility as a service or visibility in general. Everybody has to be moving at that speed if we want to stay ahead. And then as new assets come online, whether those are generated through, some type of automated deployment pipeline like CI/CD, whether those are just deployed quickly with a third-party tool set, or whether those are just deployed manually, like assets have often been done over the last 40 years. The reality is that the speed and expeditious nature of understanding those, understanding the risk profile, and then building a solution on top of it is crucial.
Yeah, I mean, we always hear, if you can't see it, you can't protect it. You don't know what you got, obviously, right? And we all know as well by now that when you do a discovery, everybody gets an aha moment and go, holy, I didn't know that. I didn't know we had that still going on, right? And so you're kind of uncovering, I don't know, a level of risks that you don't need, so you can very quickly eradicate those things, like remove those IoT devices that we haven't used in the last years. Why is this thing that's been discontinued for the last 5 years still plugged in? And who's using the server still, et cetera, right? So you get the low-hanging fruit off the off the table, so to speak. You just in your experience, and I'm always very curious, when you do the initial discoveries and so on, if you had to give up like a percentage of things that you found, right? That you can quickly remove that it shouldn't even be there. Is there a number? Is it like 10% of the stuff you shouldn't even have that you just forgot about? Is there like what does that exposure look like? Things that they don't need that is plugged into their game.
Yeah, what's interesting is, and it's certainly dependent on the industry. And I would answer that somewhat a little bit differently, but then I'll get to your question. When we get engaged with customers, we see anywhere from about 20% to about 80% of the assets that we uncover the customer knew about. And that can be very scary. I mean, if we uncover and the customer only knew about 20% of the assets, percent of everything in the organization was unknown. And that actually happens shockingly often. And, by and large, we primarily only operate in the upper mid market and the enterprise. That's primarily where our customers exist. We're certainly going more downstream. We're going into the lower mid market. We're going into into those spaces. But the reality is, what we've seen is really kind of that arena. Now, when you double click on that, out of those known and as well as those unknowns, certainly in the unknown space, that's highly concerning. Basically everything in the unknown space, no one knew who was accessing it. No one knew it even existed. No one knew if it had any type of security posture. Nobody knew if it had been breached. Nobody knew if it had an operational risk. Nobody knew if that operational risk was affecting other things. All those things kind of happen. But if we move into the 20%, and I'm picking the worst case scenario in this example, but in the 20%, which you would generally think the organization understands pretty well, and then oftentimes they do, but there are significant gaps. Who's logging into that machine? What are they actually using it for? We know that there's this Windows server here. That's great. But what is it for? We know it has SQL on it. Okay. We know it kind of works with these other systems. We have some insight into that. But what does it really do? And I think those are some of the major pieces that we often see. In this era of, all of the transformation that's going on inside of organizations, this is certainly becoming a larger and larger problem. Because if you think about infrastructure today in most organizations, the historical infrastructure team in a corporation isn't the team that's deploying this infrastructure anymore. It's generally a dev team tied into some type of DevOps team. And so now it's becoming automated, whether that automation is in the cloud, think of AWS or Azure or GCP, or it's on premise. We see this on VMware every day. We see this on Kubernetes deployed on premise every day. Each one of those becomes a paramount risk. And I think as we're really kind of putting our lens on visibility, we have to understand what we have first. And that's really the point that I want everybody to always remember is, so often we focus on the speeds and feeds of visibility. Do we have the best visibility system on the planet? Can we understand, this machine responds to ping, this responds to SNMP, this responds with some specific API, so on and so forth, all those the technical widgets behind it. But the reality is if you don't understand all this additional detail, all you're really doing is watching the proverbial train crash. That's what's happening. The train is certainly crashing, but you knew that there was no bridge. The bridge was out. Watch Old Western. It was out. All of us knew that.
I wonder if that bridge is going to be rebuilt by the time we get across it. Yeah, that could work.
And so that's what we're wrestling with here is we're wrestling with those things. And so as we look at the arena of how do we transform, how do we align with the innovation that's happening within corporations, we have to really be able to support those pieces. We have to align efficiently and we have to align at the speed of our customers.
I think that's where the context comes in, because you get all these things. And I was like, what is it? What is it doing? Like, how do we really know what it does? Right. As you said, right. So having that context to understand how these dots connect, these things connect, how's your how's your platform? How do you help these folks connect that, the dots to have some context?
Yeah. So, I mean, our platform, we chose one path to solve this problem. And the path we chose was to integrate with the solutions customers already have by and large. So most customers actually already have all the data. They just don't know how to surface that data to be
Mm,
something that's actionable. And this is true with MSPs as well. We have lots of partnerships with MSPs who use our technology, and they do exactly the same thing. By and large, their customers have the data. No one just knows how to surface it. It's in all these disparate systems. So they may have gone out and they may have deployed CrowdStrike, and then maybe they deployed ExtraHop, and then maybe they deployed, a Palo Alto Networks firewall, and they have all these disparate solutions. And what they're doing from a security perspective is they're feeding all those logs into a single platform. This happens by and large in most organizations. We'll say it's Splunk. So they feed it all into Splunk. They have all this information. The reality is the organization itself really knows nothing about what's happening in each of these systems other than the security team has logs. They know when something breaks from a log perspective, but they know nothing else about what's going on. They also, when they get a log or a metric, they generally don't know how to fix it because they're going to get a metric off one asset or one piece of infrastructure, but the cause of that problem may not actually be that source. It may be somewhere else. Something else may have been breached, something else may have been compromised, and you got an alert on this one asset. Well, that asset may not be important, maybe the least important asset you have, while the attackers are in the middle of your crown jewels. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's do a few things. One thing is taking this concept of doing scans across organizations, which most people have done over the last 20 or 25 years, is really hard. Number one, it increases breach risk for the organization. If the scanner gets breached, then by virtue, they generally can breach everything else within the organization. And that's both operationally and security wise. So what we did is we built integrations to tie into what customers have. So CI/CD pipelines, things like CrowdStrike or Palo Alto or Fortinet or their cloud providers, so on and so forth, all those individual arenas. The other thing that's really helped us a lot, especially in industries, if you go into regulated industries like healthcare, you go into the energy sector, oftentimes they have very custom technologies that they're dealing with. They're not dealing with a Dell laptop. They're not dealing with an HP server. Those are pretty well understood. They're dealing with a GE MRI. How do you monitor that? How do you understand what's going on? How do you understand how it's built? Well, most of those systems actually have an API. Historically, most systems out there, though, that would work with that, it's a really arduous, slow process to integrate with them. So we just built a super easy, no code solution that allows you to integrate. So you can build your own integrator in 5 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on the complexity, but certainly in the minutes realm. And you can start pulling all that information into our platform. And so we leverage all that to operate at the speed of the business. As they deploy new resources, we automatically pull them in. We understand the scope. We understand how they communicate with each other. And then we build that core, what the industry calls in the AI space a knowledge graph. We call it a relationship graph, but we build that core knowledge graph inside of our environment. And so that's really kind of what's allowed us to be successful. Now, when I flip that around and I talk about, just this in generality outside of what we do, really the key and what I would tell everybody that's listening to this is, constantly think about how you're leveraging your technologies and your processes and your procedures to be able to support things like this. This concept of getting a spreadsheet with your customers' assets and using that to ingest into your monitoring tools, your visibility tools, that's not going to fly today. You can't be doing that anymore. You'll never be fast enough. I mean, even if you could get a spreadsheet every hour of every day for the rest of our lives, you're always going to be 60 minutes late. That's the problem. And there's no way that spreadsheet's ever going to be accurate. All of us know that. And so, the key is you've got to be thinking about this. operate at the point in time of your customer. As your customer is deploying, as your customer is operating, figure out how you can intricately integrate inside of that. Number one, that builds a great customer experience for your customer. But if you're in the channel, it also makes you really sticky. It's really hard to remove you for a competitor that might be 50 cents cheaper. That ecosystem goes away because you've spent the time and effort to really integrate with what your customer's doing. And so those are the things I would say as we kind of think about visibility as a service, and we think about, how do we take this and how do we operate in this era that we're dealing with? And then also, how do we mitigate a lot of this risk? Now, certainly when we think about AI, we also now need to start incorporating things like MCPs and LLM routers and things like that we may have historically not looked at. But if you take the same concepts that we've just talked about, those same concepts go directly to those solutions. You can tie into an MCP. You can operate inside of it. Wow, I can look at the queries that are happening. I can understand the risk and the exposure. Now, some customers may not want you to do that because as an MSP, maybe that's not your forte. But if it is your forte and you're playing in the application space, that's a great avenue. You can do the same thing with an LLM router. You can tie in and you can perform those. You can also leverage those same capabilities and have your customer, through you exposing your own APIs as an MSP or a channel partner, you can have your customers query their own data that you see directly in their own LLM itself. So just lots of really great plays that you can do and really great ways you can continue to differentiate and then truly provide that next generation visibility.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely, the bad actors are getting in there and, sub 5-6 minutes, right? So, waiting for 60 minutes seems to be a futile experience. It doesn't make sense. And I think we used to rely heavily on human expertise, the guy or gal who knew this game, who would look at these things and go, I kind of know what's going on there. And was a lot of like gut instinct expertise. And that's good when the volume is not as crazy, but as a volume of the attack surface increases, right? Even if they can do, like you said, a spreadsheet every 60 minutes and identify very quickly, that one is a bad one, look at this, whatever. I mean, how much of this can you do before you hit the burnout and tap out, right? It's just too much, right? So you need to automate this. Period. I don't even see there's an option. What do you say to people who still trying to do the old way?
What I would say is it's going to be a very painful road. I can't say anything different than that. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
It's operationally expensive. It's highly risk prone. Those are all pieces that are really hard. Anytime you're inputting data in manually, even if you have some level of automation to get it into that spreadsheet, there's still lots of risk options.
Yeah.
It's dealing with tens of thousands of assets. I mean, we have customers with millions of assets. And when you think about millions of assets, 10 of them are wrong.
Well, it's impossible. I just say that just gear up, my friends, because the speed now of how detection and attacks are happening has sort of outlived the human capabilities in many, many ways. And these new technologies, these new LLMs and so forth that's coming out is demonstrating this. The market is also seeing this, and that's impacting how valuation and stock market pricings are happening in the security world as well. So I think everybody kind of sees this. As like you said, we see that bridge missing. We're heading towards it. We're not quite sure, if we're going to stop in time. But generally, I don't even know if there's a choice anymore. It doesn't make sense any other way. So looking at the MSP community, right, Jeff, they got this challenge ahead of them. They've got to figure out how to deliver better outcomes. They got to keep their customers from going bankrupt, getting attacked, and all these crazy things that they never really, truth be told, they never had to do this before. I mean, it's like they're one mistake away from I don't want to say death, but from a very big catastrophe. So what's your advice for them of how they should pull back and look at their own ecosystem of end customers and what they've got to do to ensure their clients and themselves, right, are sort of like up to speed, understand where all the things are, so we could figure out how to prioritize them, know the context, etc. What's your best advice to them?
Yeah, so what I would say is, and you talked about this a little bit earlier, MSPs are built on heroes today. You
Yeah.
start with your heroes. Your heroes actually have the playbook of what's necessary. The heroes know how to do it. It's inside of their head. So take that and leverage that to build, number one, operational playbooks, then go after the technology behind those operational playbooks. And if you build a roadmap like that, it's deliverable. One of the things that scares me is I see MSPs all the time and lots of organizations. And each one of those organizations, what happens is those organizations start with the technology and they start throwing technology at the problem. The risk is you can't throw technology at the problem. If you throw technology at the problem, you've already lost because you're never going to be able to align with what your customers actually want. If you go to AI, and this is a perfect use case, go to AI and ask it any question in the world you would like. The reality is that AI will do one of two things, generally speaking. It will either give you a right answer or it will hallucinate and give you a really wrong answer. And I'm sure everybody that's listening to this has experienced that. They've seen AI come back and the answer is not even in reality. Well, that's because AI inherently needs to be grounded. And this is one of the things across the board that people have to remember is if you're going to use AI to help you help your customer, you have to have great grounding. And the only way to get great grounding is to build rules. So just like you've gone to your heroes and you've told your heroes, these are your sets of rules. Now, your hero rules may be really simple, like do no harm to our customer. That might be rule number one. Rule number two is if the customer gets mad at you, maybe don't physically attack them or something. You know, pretty, they're rules that
Basic rules.
they're basic rules. But when we go to AI has this mind of think of it as like a second grade child with ADD. They have this mind where they just keep going and going and going, and they just keep yearning for more. That's how AI operates. So when we think of rules, we have to tell AI what it can and can't do. We have to give it things like, hey, by the way, you can do anything in the world with our customer's environment as long as it falls underneath these four areas. You can only look at physical servers, let's say. You can only look at routers. You can only look at maybe wireless access points. Those are the only things that can happen. If it's not in those arenas, don't do it. And then the next thing is, once you find those, don't do bad things to them. Only do things to them. I mean, it sounds very basic, but those operational playbooks are key. And I know that I'm greatly oversimplifying this, but I want everybody who listens to remember that you have all the keys. Every MSP on the planet has the keys. They've been around a long time. If you're an MSP in business today, you've gone through really hard periods. You've gone through financial hurdles. You've gone through the advent of the internet. You probably went through the dot-com era. You've gone through automation. When we started, none of us had automation. Maybe we had a basic Python or a shell script.
Automation was an Excel sheet. That was an
So
email.
I think about that. Take things that have made you successful, write those down, and then leverage those to go in and create a technology that makes sense. Whether you decide to build that technology, whether you decide to buy that technology, all of those can be great solutions. But just make sure you have the posture and the methodology behind it, and then you'll be successful.
Good advice, Jeff. Look, the one thing that kind of like disturbs this playbook, right, is that so you've got these agents, right, that we're all playing with, all right, and the agents with their agents, and then the question is, you say, let's put some governance around this and tell them, don't do this, discover these things only do nice things to them when you discover them. But playing devil's advocate here, like how the hell do we know we can actually force them? I'm using the word them because it's a bit of a new species, so let's refer to them as them or it. How do we force it to not do bad things? Like, how do we know they won't do bad things?
Yeah, so it's certainly, all of us have always heard this adage of trust yet verify. We've always heard this.
Yeah.
In order to get to trust,
More
we
important today, by the way, Jeff, than ever before. Trust to verify everything.
but
Yeah.
if we think about trust, so trust only comes because it's earned. And the way that you earn it with AI, or the way that AI earns it from you, is by having that grounding. So those rules engines, that's really the key. So that's the first piece. Make sure you're really crystal clear. Every single AI platform that is out there, you can build grounding into it. Every one of them. You can
Yeah.
build tools, you can build controls, you can build everything that you want it to do. You can also enrich it. You can also teach AI. And so as you do those things, you're building that intentional grounding so that trust is earned. The second piece is always verify. Not verify randomly, not verify one of 1,000 transactions, verify every single one of them. And ensure that you have knowledge of every single thing it has done, just like we do today. We do that today with every one of our personnel. If a person goes and logs into a machine, we log that. We know what they're doing, or at least we should. If you're not doing that, please start doing that. But the same reality needs to happen here. We can always trust people, but we always have to verify that they continue to earn our trust. Because if one day maybe the manufacturer accidentally makes a mistake, and maybe it's Anthropic, and they make a mistake, and all of a sudden Claude Opus 5.36 or whatever it is at that point in time decides that it's not going to be happy today. It becomes the Terminator, and that happened. We have to be able to understand the scope of what occurred. And so as those things happen, we have to have that core capability to understand that, to log that, and then ultimately to be able to remediate that if something happened.
100%. Hey, when the Terminator was first, he was a bad person. Then he became a good person. Then it became like a half bad, good person. And then eventually, boom, right? Stuff happened. The reality is that, while we try to figure all these analogies of where we're growing or growing to or going to, I mean, in a way, we've created a new species, right? And I put it in quotes.
Mhm.
And like every new species, if we discovered some species, and I don't know, on the moon or Mars or whatever, and we brought it back here to Earth, what are we going to do, man? We're not going to have it run around. I'm pretty sure we're going to kind of lock it down and figure out what the damn thing does, right? And the reality is that we all got to proceed with some kind of a caution. And I think it's kind of opening the gates to new ideas, new thinking, new ways of looking at stuff. And I think the challenge here of change is human change. What we were doing in the past is not necessarily what we need to do in the future. Even if we wanted to, we can't, it's no longer business as usual. I mean, it's just that simple. And we can probably pull 1,000 examples, use cases today where that doesn't exist anymore, right? So we're moving at this rapid speed, and we need to evolve the tool stack, the technology, the knowledge, the people, the process, the things, all that stuff got to come together. It's not one thing, right? So, it's really great when companies like yourselves are looking at the bigger picture and trying to help humans understand how all these things are connected. Because unless we see this fast, I want to add as well, unless we see this really fast, right, we're going to be too late to react. And of course, when that happens, well, that's what the bad actors are hoping for, right? Because they know we can't juggle all these pieces and we don't know what's going on. So you got to get ahead and stay ahead of this curve. And as you clearly pointed out, those who do this well are going to win. The customer is going to be more sticky. Jeff, I give you the last word here, my friend. What do you want the channel community to know about, or what's next coming out from your company? What's next with OneWire? What are you working on?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, right now we're focused on a couple of things. One of the big things that we're focused on right now that we see as a huge opportunity in the marketplace is really, how do we streamline this concept of incident management? So, we do a great job of understanding the customer's environment. We understand, what's going on in the customer environment, all those types of things. But by and large, we've been really reliant on incident handling from third-party applications that are out there. And basically, every MSP on the planet knows these systems, these incident management systems. Most of those, well, at least all of them we've ever found, don't operate at this speed. They're not dynamic enough. They can't support change rapidly. And so we're working on a new system which will support that at scale and really be able to help drive that incident handling process so that the right resources can actually resolve what's going on. Whether those resources are systematic, we're going to have systematic resolution. Think of things like in the cloud where we often resolve systematically, or something, maybe it's on premise, maybe it's something inside of a SCADA network that requires a person to get involved, but it's having that expeditious processing and then also that validation on the back end to ensure that what was done actually fixed that problem. And so that's what we're working on right now. That'll launch later this year. Think of Q3 timeframe, but it's a big fun one for us. We've got about 45 developers on it right now, so a good sized team working on it.
Good for you, Jeff, because yeah, you're right. We got to evolve this thing, right? Because I don't know where it's going. All I know is it's getting a little bit different every day, and I don't know what the speed of change is, but it seems to be getting faster. And getting ahead of this is going to be mission critical because I just feel we're kind of like a little bit outside of the human grasp of all the stuff that's happening, and we have to giddy up and get there a little bit faster. Best advice, last advice. What do you want all the channel partners to know?
I would say for all the channel partners, these same concepts we talked about across the board while we were focused on MSP primarily, these same concepts exist in all aspects of channel partners. And so really the key here is that as you're going forth, remember these concepts, remember that, operational process is still king. And what we're able to do is we have to continue really driving and delivering on this across all of our customers' engagements, making sure that we operate at a speed that allows our customers to be successful and operate at the speed that they're operating at as well. Because if we're slower than they are, they'll find someone else that can support them.
It's okay, man. Who gets there fast? I guess the game today is, right? As the bad actors get in there faster and faster and faster, it's all about how fast you get in. The time to detect is critical. Time to resolve is obviously more critical, because if they're getting in there faster and we're still using archaic tools to figure out what's going on after the fact, well, it's pretty easy to see who's going to lose and who's going to win. So Jeff, what's the website address for them to learn more about what you guys are working on? And will that new functionality, is that going to be included, or is that an add-on price?
It'll be an add-on price, but just like in the way that we have priced WanAware holistically, we've really always focused on pricing so that the general population can afford it. We've always built our platform with that mindset that accessibility is key. And if you look at kind of our corporate responsibility metrics, we really want to focus on adding that ability. And so it'll certainly be a much lower price point than what you see in the marketplace today by a large amount. I mean, if you look at our asset inventory, we support 5,000 assets for $1,000 a month, which is
Mm.
20% of most of our competitors, and we do it in a lot better manner. We'll be in a similar type of model from a pricing perspective. We don't ever want price to be a hindrance for an organization to be able to drive success, whether you're an MSP or whether you're a corporation. We never want price to be that inhibiting factor that causes you not to be able to be safe, secure, or operationally sound.
Wish everybody thinks like you, my friend. Jeff, it's always been a pleasure. And for MSPs out there, I mean, this is just a really great example of how you can actually get ahead of that curve. And I think the smart MSPs and MSSPs are thinking like, what's next? What's coming around that corner that I need to build up on right now to get ahead for myself and my clients? Because at the end of the day, if you're not protecting your clients, well, somebody else probably will. So good luck with all that stuff. Jeff, been a pleasure, man. Keep us posted out when that comes out. Cheers.
That's great. Thanks, Julian. Have a great one.
See you.